Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. I'm going to be keeping this one short and sweet due to the sensitivity of the subject and the sensitivity of those who try to attack channels like this just for any reason. Jerusalem is the spiritual capital of Israel. The name means the city of peace, but as the Bible says, they say peace, peace, when there is no peace. Oh, it's war over there. Again, frankly, I didn't know that the fighting had ever stopped. Everyone's heard by now that Hamas has carried out a huge attack against Israel, using rockets, guys on boats, even power gliders, and of course, a gang of ground troops. The country is currently a war zone. Once more. President Biden has already pledged billions of dollars to Israel. That money can be added to the $3.9 billion that the U.S. has given Israel every year since the 1970s. Most of the U.S.'s foreign aid to Israel goes to its military, so basically the U.S. has been paying for Israel's armed forces. On top of that, Israel has a nuclear arsenal, hundreds of warheads. Now, I would think that that alone would remove the need for more foreign aid since they have all of this nuclear firepower, the most in their part of the region. And of course, you have Israel's leaders who have frequently boasted about how well their economy is doing. That being the case, nuclear warheads and a robust economy, where is that almost $4 billion per year going? Because based on this incident, obviously it's not going towards surveillance or any sort of national intelligence. Also, you see how magically Joe Biden and the Democrats could pull billions of dollars out of a hat for Israel on a moment's notice? They tell black people there's no money for anything for us. Roads, bridges, reparations, but as soon as you get some non-black folks who ask for something, all of a sudden these same politicians who were pleading poverty a moment ago can magically find it. They find it instantly. And of course, I'm sure I'm not the only one who's noticed the timing of this assault. It's more than a little convenient for Benjamin Netanyahu. He's the corrupt and racist autocrat of Israel. And he's also been on trial for accepting bribes and being generally corrupt. His trial was going on right now, and up until 48 hours ago, his trial had been the biggest news coming out of Israel. That and how Netanyahu and his pals in the Likud party have conspired to take all authority away from Israel's Supreme Court, which basically would make Netanyahu a super branch of government unto himself, unaccountable to anyone under law, because Israel doesn't have a constitution. Yeah, Netanyahu was in hot water. He couldn't even show his face publicly. That is, up until 48 hours ago. Now Netanyahu's had a complete image makeover. Oh, he's been instantly reinvented. He's in front of the cameras again. World leaders who have been shunning him are now openly supporting him again. The Israeli public, who just a couple of weeks ago was protesting him in the streets in unprecedented numbers, they've now fallen silent. Many people said that it would take a miracle to save Netanyahu from a prison cell. Well, looks like his prayers were answered. The Israeli government is claiming that the death toll currently stands at 700 plus Israelis and rising, with over 250 people being killed at a music festival alone. The BBC says that this is the largest loss of life that Israel's experienced in a single day. This latest outbreak of armed conflict is bad for Palestinians and Israelis alike, but the one person that's been good for is Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't think it's at all rude to ask, how did Hamas manage to pull this off? Israel has nationwide security surveillance, and their intelligence gathering is excellent. Nothing of this nature has happened in this country since the 1970s, and even then, that was an outward assault by countries outside of Israel's borders. This was actually an inside job. How did Hamas manage to sneak in what the white media has claimed are thousands of rockets? How did they manage to sneak all that into Israel and do it right under the Israeli military's noses? You have ships with food for Palestinians showing up in the dark of the night, and they can't get past Israel's security forces. The Palestinians can't even bring groceries into the West Bank without running a gauntlet of security checkpoints. Usually, Hamas has only been able to make a few homemade rockets. They don't get very far and don't do very much, nothing too serious. But this time they actually had military-grade rockets and thousands of them. And these things made some real distance, and they were anything but duds. On top of that, Hamas had managed to coordinate a land assault with hundreds of armed members who stormed their way past Israel's border fence. And from there they took dozens of Israelis hostage, as many as 100 is estimated. They even overran an Israeli tank crew, taking the Israeli soldiers hostage. Now, the reason for the hostage-taking is pretty straightforward. That's basically been the pastime over there in the Muslim world for the longest time. Now, the Israelis normally respond to any aggressive move by the Palestinians by launching tons of missiles all over the place and leveling buildings and such. Benjamin Netanyahu's been threatening to level Gaza, but he's going to have to wait a little bit before he does that because with dozens of hostages now in Gaza and no way of knowing exactly where they are, that's going to make it very dicey for the Israelis to try to level the place, which is what they normally do. Yes, they're launching airstrikes, but not with the ferocity that they normally would. Now, the Israelis are going to be forced to put infantry in there to find any Hamas operatives and free any hostages. That basically levels the playing field more or less for Hamas's gunmen. It was kind of clever on their part, actually, to reduce Israel's air superiority without having any planes of their own. The Israeli government is saying that Iran was behind this attack, at least as far as the planning and coordination of it goes. Of course, the Israeli government also has blamed Syria for attacks in the past, as well as Lebanon. Iran is part of the U.S.'s axis of evil, so the U.S. has had them on the list for regime change for many years now, though up until now, the U.S. didn't have a politically defensible reason for trying any sort of military maneuver against Iran. The Israelis didn't have a reason either. This incident, though, changes that. Whether Iran was truly behind this or not won't matter any more than the fact that Saddam Hussein wasn't behind 9/11, but the Bush administration falsely claimed he was anyway, and by the time W and the boys finally fessed up to the truth, it didn't matter because Iraq had already been invaded and taken over and the U.S. had installed its own puppet leaders there. This war could very well spread beyond Israel's borders. Already the IDF is pointing at the hills of Lebanon and saying that there's missile attacks coming from there too. So, where do we stand in all of this? Well, there's no sides for us to take here, the same way that there weren't any last year when war broke out in Ukraine. We had nothing to do with the enmity between these two factions, so nothing we say or do is going to make them stop. Besides, they've both shown hostility towards us in the U.S. and abroad. As unfortunate as all this is, it should be remembered that Black Americans are oppressed and persecuted every single day, and our persecution has lasted far longer than the Palestinians. We have been under threat far longer than the Israelis, too. The death toll among the Israelis is in the 100, and that is certainly shocking for them, but we've had racial massacres that we've been subjected to in the U.S. with death tolls far higher. So no matter what side anyone decides to take in this conflict, you can't deny that what's been happening to black people in the United States is far worse. But that death toll and carnage goes completely and thoroughly unanswered. Excuses are made rather than huge amounts of money paid. And that is not okay. Because when you have a situation like the one in the United States, there is supposed to be a robust and aggressive response. Instead, what we get is silence and a dogged determination to ignore the suffering that we've endured. What's going on in Israel is the same thing that we've seen in many other countries around the world, which is how other groups respond when they're being mistreated. This country should be exceedingly grateful that black people have shown extraordinary restraint and have not responded with massive violence or some sort of insurgency, because that's what happens in other countries. Next time somebody tries to tell you that black people are being too radical with our demands, and that we're simply being too radical with all these things that we say, you go ahead and you point them over to Palestine, you point them to these other groups. Let them see what radical actually looks like, and then remind them just how good they've got it here. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Charlie, Sabrina, Morris Bodden, Keiko Intugoku, and Kenneth Prescia. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.